and welcome to today's lecture on Zeus. I'm your professor, Dr. Rob Steffen, and today we are going to take a look at the king of the Olympian gods. Now, Zeus is at the top, but as we've seen, the top can be a very treacherous place. He plays his role admirably, although it's not without challenges, especially from his wife, Hera. So let's go ahead and take a look at how Zeus keeps order on Olympus and on Earth.
Zeus, king of the gods. But this was not always so. We saw previously that Zeus is the youngest son of the Titans Cronus and Rhea, and it was only through Rhea's deception, giving Cronus a cloth-wrapped rock to eat whole, that Zeus was able to survive, grow, and eventually free his Olympian siblings. Zeus, like his father, ended up marrying his sister, Hera. I guess there just weren't many options back then. And while Zeus sired many children, only a small number were with his wife. With Leto he bore Artemis and Apollo, with Demeter he fathered Persephone, with Semele he gave rise to Dionysus, and with the Titaness Metis he gave birth to Athena. And if that sounds like a recipe for an unhealthy relationship, you wouldn't be wrong. Zeus is constantly getting nagged by Hera about his incessant philandering, and we'll see some examples of his trysts later in this lecture.
Now, you can always identify Zeus from some of his most common attributes, namely the thunder or lightning bolt, or his most closely associated animal, the eagle. Okay, let's go ahead and figure out what he's all about.
It's easy to think of Zeus as the father of gods and mortals. But not so fast, my friend. He's certainly not the first god, and he certainly didn't create the first man, although he did punish poor Prometheus for that part in the creation. Instead, think of Zeus as a god who brings order, both to Olympus and to the realm of man. He does this by wielding the weapons of the sky, both thunder and lightning, weapons created for him by the Cyclopes in preparation for the battle with the Titans. As a result of this manner of power, Zeus is sometimes referred to by the cult title Zeus Ombrios, basically Zeus, the Stormbringer.
So we can see that the gods have many different cult titles, right? Different places and different people at different times worship the gods in different sorts of ways. So not only do we have Zeus Ombrios, Zeus the Stormbringer, we also have Zeus Horcius, who is Zeus of the Oaths. We've got Zeus Filius, Zeus of Friendship, Zeus Zenius, Zeus of Hospitality, and Zeus Malicius, Zeus the Mild One. Now, it might not be totally obvious what cult title actually means, so let's go ahead and define cult. A cult is a set of repeated rituals that take place towards a particular deity at a particular place. So location is very important here. And what that means is that different people in different places can worship the gods in different ways. Rituals, in turn, are a set of repeated actions that are used to worship the gods. So things like sacrifices or dedications, songs or dances, processions or prayers, that sort of thing.
For Zeus, most of his cults take place on mountaintops, which makes sense considering he's the god of the sky. And some of the most important mountaintop cults for Zeus are associated with his personal origin story. You may remember that Zeus was saved from being eaten alive when his mother Rhea replaced him with a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes. Where Zeus went to grow up after this deception is a matter of some debate. Some sources say that Zeus went to Mount Ida on the island of Crete to be raised by nymphs. Other sources claim he wound up in the Peloponnese, near the site of Mount Lycaon. And both of these locations ended up with strong cults to the king of Olympus. The story of Lycaon is one of modern horror movies. Years after Zeus's ascension as leader of the Olympian gods, a young man named Lycaon decided to test Zeus's omniscience by serving him a piece of human flesh, that of his own son Pelops, as part of a sacrifice to the god. Zeus, as punishment for this heinous crime, turned Lycaon into a wolf, what we might call a werewolf, for 9 full years. Later, a particular version of Zeus, Zeus Lycaon, or Werewolf Zeus, was worshipped at the site, and thus the precedent for no human sacrifices was set for ancient Greece.
So thus far, we've seen Zeus Ombrios, Stormbringer Zeus, and Zeus Lycaos, Werewolf Zeus. So what's the deal with this dude? Does he actually have one true nature? Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the kind of multiple ways that the Greeks conceived of the nature of Zeus.
Our first example of the ancient Greeks' conception of Zeus comes from Hesiod's Works and Days, one of the Greeks' earliest texts and one that tells of the early relationship between humans and the divine. In the Works and Days, Zeus is portrayed as a god of justice, meting out rewards and punishments based on the behavior of the people. People worship the gods appropriately, Zeus will send rain and crops will flourish. People neglect the appropriate sacrifices, Zeus will withhold rain, and famine, plague, and pestilence will befall the land. And so Zeus seems intimately engaged in the behavior of mortals. Another depiction of Zeus is in Homer's Iliad, an epic that tells the tale of Achilles and the Trojan War, and is roughly contemporary with Hesiod's Works and Days. Here, Zeus seems far more detached from human behavior. The death of his son Sarpedon serves as a prime example. Zeus loved Sarpedon, and Sarpedon had always treated his father with respect. Yet the fates had declared Sarpedon must die at the hands of Patroclus. And when Zeus desires to intervene to save his son, Hera, his wife, reminds him of his obligations to the fates and to the other Olympians invested in the war. Sarpedon, sadly, is left to his untimely demise.
So sometimes we see Zeus very heavily influenced in what's going on Earth, right? You do well, he's going to treat you well. You neglect the gods, he's going to send famine or flood or disease. Other times, however, we see him very divorced from whatever humans are doing. No matter how well you might worship the gods, sometimes Zeus still can't help you. And in large part, that's because he has obligations to the other gods and goddesses upon Olympus. Many of the myths that Zeus plays a role in involve the abduction or seduction of goddesses or mortal women. Zeus just can't seem to keep it in his toga. But many of these are not exactly consensual, and the issue of forcing women against their will is obviously a very serious one. And in this case, it can shed light on the role that women had in ancient Greek society. Very frequently, they were very limited in power, especially outside of the house. And these myths are one way that people try to grapple with that issue. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these myths more closely.
First, we have Europa and the bull. In this story, Zeus peers down on the Phoenician princess Europa, finding her so beautiful that he simply must have her. To make his move, he turns himself into a bull and infiltrates her flock. Europa finds this particular bull so physically attractive that she eventually hops on its back. At that moment, Zeus makes a break for it, darting across the land, jumping into the sea, and swimming all the way to the island of Crete. There he consummates his relationship, and 9 months later, Minos, the first king of Crete, is born to Europa. And Europa herself becomes the namesake of an entire continent. Next up, we have Ganymede, a Trojan prince so beautiful that Zeus just can't help himself. He turns himself into an eagle, snatches young Ganymede, and carries him off to Olympus. Here Ganymede becomes one of the few mortals turned immortal, becoming the cupbearer to the gods on Olympus. Finally, we have Leda and the Swan. Leda is the wife of King Tyndareus of Sparta, and while the king's away, Zeus will play. He turns himself into a swan and either snatches up Leda or seduces Leda, based on your own interpretation of the story. Later, Tyndareus also sleeps with his wife, who bears 4 children, Helen and Pollux to Zeus, and Clytemnestra and Castor to Tyndareus.
So the ambiguity with this abduction versus seduction in these myths shows that the Greeks grappled with the tensions that rise from women having fairly little power, especially when it comes to marriage and relationships, where they're at kind of the mercy of their family and these familial alliances, rather than their own preference in who they marry. So what can we take away from today's lecture? Well, first of all, we can see women have it fairly tough in ancient Greek society. They didn't have much power in public life, and they also didn't really have much of a say in who they married. Second of all, we see that with the gods, they take many different forms over place and time, so different places worship the gods in different ways. And Zeus is not just king of the gods, he's also the kind of god of many different things, from friendship to hospitality to oaths to storms. And finally, we see with Zeus that while you definitely want to worship Zeus, in no way should you act like Zeus. If you have one takeaway, don't act like Zeus. So just a couple things you can learn from today's lecture on Zeus, king of the gods.